You're listening to the legendary podcaster, the one, the only, T-Jam D. Your personal favorite, and the show you've been waiting for. Probably offensive.
Welcome to another episode of Probably Offensive. One of these days we may get to the point where this show is not offending anyone because I'm just giving you my opinion, basically. So, we'll get there someday. Maybe not, I don't know. But anyway, I'm your host. I'm Anthony Scott Dover. I'm glad for those of you who are listening can join us again. We're in the middle of a pandemic, even though that pandemic has been overshadowed by protests of police brutality, which it's been a long time coming with the protests. I'll give you a quick update of the pandemic. We are up to 2 million recorded cases of COVID-19 right now. We surpassed over 100,000 dead of the coronavirus some time ago. And 2 million cases. And as I said, many times before I've said that I don't think these counts were accurate. I think they're much higher than what's said because we still haven't gotten to the point with this pandemic as far as having, enough people being tested. I think there's been a lot of people who have had coronavirus and they've gotten over it, and now they're immune, and they can't pass it or contract it. So I could be wrong, but that's not likely. That's not likely to be the case. What's likely to be the case is that I'm right. We just don't know what the numbers are of people who actually had COVID-19 and may never be tested. I think it's been millions actually. So we'll see. I think we'll see. At some point they will get a vaccine for it. So it'll be academic. Right now they have all the arguing going back and forth about whether shutting down the country's economy was the right thing to do or unnecessary. And I'll tell you like this, the coronavirus, this strand of it spreads pretty easily. I mean, you could touch somebody if you have it on your hands from coughing or sneezing if you've had it, or if you touch the doorknob or something and someone else has had it from coughing or sneezing. And you can spread it by touching people, shaking hands, or coughing on people or sneezing on them. So it's easy to spread. And since there's no vaccine for it, I don't know if shutting down the country for over 2 months was the right thing to do. But that's what's been done. I think the way it could have been handled unrealistically, because you never get everybody to do this, was when it was first discovered and doctors knew that the incubation period was 14 days. They should have lock down the country for 2 weeks, except for hospital workers. And then, because they get sick people already in the hospital from other things. But that's unrealistic. You're never going to get people to stay in, especially when it was unheard of at the time. But in January, when they heard about COVID-19, they should have locked the country down at that point. And 2 weeks, real essential workers are not, everybody delivering products in grocery stores and stuff. 2 weeks, people could go. You should have gave people a heads up and been like, look, got this virus, spreads pretty easy, no vaccine. We're going to lock the country down for 2 weeks. Stay in your homes for 2 weeks, everybody in America. That's unrealistic, though. You never can get that type of cooperation from people, Then you got, people, homeless people in some of these warmer places. I always looked at homeless people in cold weather cities and been like thinking, what the hell are you doing, man? What are you doing out there? But anyway, that's an unrealistic solution, but it may have worked. We would have been past the coronavirus after 2 weeks. Those people who had it would have gotten over it. Those people who didn't have it wouldn't have contracted it because the people who had it would have gotten over it. That's the theory behind locking the country down for 2 weeks back in January when they found out about it, instead of the president and his staff denying that it was any issue at all. Just 15 people with it. Those 15 people will be down to zero. It's a hoax and blah, blah, blah. So they didn't handle it right. But what's new? Moving on. The murder of George Floyd. It's been some weeks ago now. Has sparked protests that are still going on. Not 1 or 2 days with the protests, but weeks of protests. And not just black people in the group Black Lives Matter out in the street with signs up. These are millions of people who have protested, and the protests have spread all around the world. We've had people from Germany and Italy, Spain, in Europe, England, protesting Black Lives Matter, holding up their signs, and some people are taking a knee during chants by the group. No justice, no peace is one of the ones I remember. But there's other chants. And the protests have continued. They're more peaceful now. When George Floyd first was murdered, the Minneapolis protest started everything. But they also started some fires, burnt down some buildings, and there was mass looting. And there was not just looting in Minneapolis, but there was mass looting around the country. But it all started in Minneapolis with the murder of George Floyd. George Floyd. I don't know a lot about George Floyd, but I keep seeing things posted about George Floyd from people who, I don't know if they're racist or just jackasses. Maybe a little bit of both. But I've seen people talking calling George Floyd a criminal. I've seen people saying all this trouble over a criminal, and seen people talking about different things that George Floyd had been accused of in the past. And I'm thinking, what does any of that matter? The man was murdered by the police. Unless you feel like he deserved to be murdered by the police for all the stuff that he done, then what's the point of bringing it up? Because you bring it up to me, that's the question I'm going to ask you. So you think that he deserved to be murdered? Is that why you're telling me George Floyd done this and George Floyd stole that? He robbed this person. So that means he should have been murdered by the police? Is that what you're saying? Well, if no, then shut up. And that's really all you got to do. Excuse me for these snorting. That's what you heard there. I'm trying not to do that. But it's allergy season, and I got allergies. So that's what you'll hear. I try to cut it to a minimum. If you can excuse me. This won't last. The snorting, I mean. But that's what it is. If I done it on the last show too, and the show before that. So I have to mention what it is. If any of you are consistently listening, you're thinking, what the hell is that sound? That's what it is. At this time of year, I always get allergies, so I'll try not to snort on the mic. But moving on, because we've had some significant, very interesting things going on. NASCAR in sports. NASCAR decided to ban the Confederate flag at their events. Those of you who listen, you know that I speak about NASCAR every now and then because I'm a sports fan. I was a NASCAR fan. I think and just on Friday night in NASCAR, they had a race from Martinsville, Virginia, I think it is. I think that. Martinsville. Anyway, short track racing. And I watched almost the whole race. And that's the first time that's happened. That is the first time. I know a lot of you saying, so what? You didn't even watch the whole race. You almost watched the whole race? Yeah. I almost watched the whole race. I didn't quite watch the whole race, but I almost did. So that's good for me. Because I had stopped watching NASCAR, and sometimes I would turn to it, but I'd only keep it on that channel for maybe 3-4 minutes. And I started watching NASCAR in the 90s because I went to Florida one time I went to Florida to Daytona, actually, but I went to Florida to see this girl, and her family was watching NASCAR.